Welcome, dear students. It's a pleasure to have you here again. So today we're going to continue with our second unit, and the main intention is that we are going to check the first topic that we have for this option. So important to take into account that today we are going to focus on the uses of past simple and past continuous for telling stories. Firstly, dear students, let's go to take into account that we can make use of the two grammar tenses, the past simple and the past continuous for storytelling. But it's really important to take into account what function each grammar tense has. So let's go to start in this context with the past simple. Take into account that you're going to use the past simple when you are going to talk about main events and what happened. So more thoroughly, you like to make emphasis on a situation or a circumstance, and something really important that I recommend you to take into account is that the action is ended. Okay, so generally you can have time expressions that help us to focus on the past. In the case of past continuous, remember that you are going to make emphasis on the background of a story. For example, if I tell you, yesterday I was walking down the street when I saw a little puppy that was crying on the floor. So if I start my narrative in this way, you're going to realize that the context is different. No, you see me here right now, but you imagine how the situation was for me in the past. Something else is to take into account that you are going to use the past continuous to make emphasis on what was happening. All right. So the action was occurring, and suddenly something occurred or happened, and the situation was interrupted. For example, I was making dinner when my husband got home. So as soon as he got home, my action ended. Something important to take into account over here. Remember that you are going to find some expressions in this unit that you can apply for storytelling too. For example, like the question that you see over here. Did I ever tell you about the time? And here you can fill up just to complete with the idea that you consider right. The next thing I knew, and you continue in this case your narrative, or at the end of the day, for example, this one could be really useful for concluding a story too, and you mention what happened. In the case of the past simple, remember that you are going to keep a structure. What is the structure that you are going to keep? The one that you realize over the side. So over here, you are going to include the subject and the verb past. Remember that there are two categories for verbs. No, you have regular and irregular verbs. So I'm going to invite you to recall what you have studied in the previous courses. Below, you're gonna find two examples. For instance, I walked, into the room. Remember to make emphasis in the past. Remember that ed sound doesn't occur like I walked. No, I walked. Okay, so this one at the end is going to be similar to a T pronunciation, right? So isn't it that you need to be really careful about? The same in this one. She dropped her phone, so you don't pronounce it like I drop it. No, it doesn't exist. She dropped. Okay. Well, just like to conclude this part, remember that the past simple he has to focus on actions that happen, occur, but they were concluded. And this is the ways we can continue the narrative. In the case of the past continuous, remember that the past continuous helps us to mention or just like to describe the background of our story. For instance, there you have to. I was walking into a room when she called me. So you can imagine me, your teacher, walking to my room, and suddenly there was a phone call. As soon as the phone call happened, I ended the action. There are two characteristics over there. You can realize how my context was, but at the same time you can realize how the action was interrupted too and didn't continue. Okay, the second one is a little bit similar too. They were talking loudly while the teacher entered. Common situations that happen in a classroom. For example, in that situation, you can imagine where there were a lot of students in the classroom, they were talking really loud, and suddenly I entered and they kept quiet. So the point over there is that the action was interrupted too, but you can imagine how that context or how that situation was. Important. How you're gonna contrast in a story. So the past continuous always is the background. The past simple is gonna be the main event that can work like a fact or can work like a reference to. Okay. Here you're gonna find an example, including one of the expressions that you have in the vocabulary list. I was waiting for the bus, minding my own business, when the next thing I knew, a man grabbed my back. Imagine the situation like you see here in the photo, right? Common situations, no, that could happen, and especially maybe we aren't careful. In the document that is below, you're going to find more expressions like the ones that you see over this side. So I would like that you try to check them and maybe to realize how the context was. Let's go to check, for example, the first one that makes reference to a question. Did I ever tell you about the time I was traveling in Spain? So here is trying to recall. No, it's just like making emphasis if the person has said or hasn't said the story. Well, obviously, in that way, if the answer is no, so the person is going to start the narrative, right? Well, in this part, I'm going to recommend you to check the other examples. Remember that the intention is to help you to contextualize the vocabulary too. What are common mistakes? It's really important to be careful with the actions that, in this case, occurred, they started and ended, and the actions that were in progress. For example, if you check the first one when the person said, I was dropped my phone, no way. This structure that you see over this side is like to use the passive voice, and by the context is not convenient. So it means that the sentence is incorrect. How will be the right form? I dropped my phone. So the person uses simple past or past simple for completed actions. On the second one, I walked to school when it rained. So are you talking about a sequence of facts or you're talking about something that you were doing and suddenly everything changed because of the rain? I will believe that the second one is the right answer. So what is going to happen? That if the action was in progress and there was something that interrupted that action, the right structure will be to use at first in this part the past continuous, and later just the second action will be in simple past. Okay, so always that you use those grammar tenses, don't forget to analyze the context. Now let's go to practice with the following exercises. You're going to try to complete the gaps with past simple or past continuous. Look at the first one. I wait at the cafe when I see my old friend. Try to think of the right answer, and if that's possible, maybe you can write the answer on a piece of paper and later we try to check, right? Try to analyze it well. I'm going to give you just some seconds. Okay, so now let's go to continue with the second one. She told me a story while we have lunch. So, what would be the right conjugation in this case, guys? Analyze it, try to imagine how the situation was. It's something that generally helps us a lot. Okay, so don't forget, if that's possible, to write your answer in a piece of paper, right? And finally, we walked home when the next thing I knew, it to rain heavily. So, check the context, imagine which one was the action that was in progress and which one was the action that interrupted, okay? Or maybe didn't allow the action to continue. Some minutes, well, some seconds. Try to analyze it very well. Had you written your answers? Well, I guess you have done it, so let's go to check. So, what are the right answers? On the first one, we have, okay, I was waiting at the cafe when I saw my old friend. Obviously, the action was in progress and this person interrupted, in this case, the action of waiting, when saw the old friend. Okay, look at the second one. She told me a story while we were having lunch. So, you imagine the background, they were having lunch, and suddenly, while the girl started to talk about something that happened to her, that's right. Okay. And the third one, we were walking home with the next thing I knew, it started to rain heavily. So what happened there? So the situation that I mentioned before in the example, they were walking and suddenly poof, it started to rain and the action was interrupted. Maybe they needed just like to hide or just like to look for any kind of shelter while the rain stopped. Okay. Well, my dear students, I hope that in this case you'll be doing a great job. But let's go just to conclude with the following summary. Don't forget that we are going to use the past simple for completed actions or events. The past continuous helps us to focus on background actions. And something important is that we can combine both grammar tenses with the storytelling idioms that are the ones that you have in this unit. So try to be creative, try to enjoy this lesson, and see you in the second topic. Okay, guys? So my best wishes in your process. Bye bye.